That's the movie I was telling you about. So I just ended with a preposition. I don't need to say that's the movie about which I was telling you. I would sound like kind of a weirdo if I did that. I might have fewer friends and a less rewarding social life.
How do you feel about split infinitives or ending a sentence with a preposition? Do you get furious when you see a misplaced comma? Do you question yourself every time you dare to attempt to use a semicolon? Well, whether you're clued in or completely clueless about grammar, there's always one place you can turn to, the grammar table. What's a grammar table, you ask? Well, stick around and find out. Welcome to the Language Podcast. I'm Richard Simcott. In this podcast, we explore the ins and outs of the one thing that makes us uniquely human, language. This first season is all about the evolution of English. If you have a burning question about grammar, who better to ask than Ellen Jovin? She's been answering grammar questions since 2018, when she set up a table outside her Manhattan apartment. From humble beginnings, Ellen's grammar table has hit the road, talking to strangers about language all around the US. She's even written a book about her travels. So yeah, she knows a thing or two about commas. So let's find out more. What exactly is a grammar table?
It is a table that I set up in places in public, parks, street corners, wherever it seems like a good idea, with a sign that says grammar table, and people just come up to me and ask me questions about grammar and language. I've been to 47 states with the grammar table, but people from other parts of the world are often in those states. So I've actually talked about English with people from literally dozens and dozens of countries around the world, as well as other languages. But I remember in a park in Austin, Texas, I talked with a family from London and got a good education in Texas on London slang. So that was educational for me. So now I can speak perfect London slang. No, I'm kidding. I can't remember any of it.
Yeah, you have to go up the apples and pears and talk on the dog and bone.
Oh my gosh. See, I'm never going to be a pro. I'm always going to just be I'll be an observing amateur.
I'm sure you'll be an expert in no time. But what is the deal with you and grammar and languages? I mean, what's your experience with all this stuff?
I've always loved grammar. I've always loved pretty much anything that had to do with language. I remember loving spelling lists. I love conjugating verbs. When I study new languages, I'm sitting there excitedly filling in the blanks with all the different tenses. And it's just, I don't know, it's just so enjoyable to me. Or like, learning new writing systems. I just love everything that has to do with language. I haven't studied as many as you, and I don't speak the volume of languages that you speak, but I've studied more than 25, and I from a variety of language families, and I love looking at how other languages arrange and form their words in sentences.
What do you think is the real reason why it's useful to know about grammar or learn about grammar? Why is it important?
It enables you to think about the way you use language in settings as an adult, for work, for general communication, to think about how you put your words together to convey your ideas more effectively, to be more in control of meaning. Everyone knows as a writer, you write down the sentence, you're looking at it and it doesn't quite look right. What's wrong with this sentence? Grammar makes it easier for you to diagnose problems with sentences, with structure. So it is a technical skill, but it also supports what's very important to me, which is the art of writing and the art of speech. How do you arrange your words? How can you think about arranging them in a more interesting and dynamic way? So it is, when I think about grammar, I think of a self-awareness of language. However you use it, being aware of how you deploy those tools is exciting, and it's also powerful.
So do you see a flexibility in grammar rules?
This is an interesting question because I think we have to start with the word rules in there. Often when people come up to the grammar table, they want to talk about a rule that they learned in school. So I get asked about things, about supposed rules and I reject the idea that those are rules to begin with. So sometimes people say things like, I don't know, you can't, like, I spend a lot of time at the table talking about how you can actually end a sentence in English with a preposition. So for example, that's the movie I was telling you about. So I just ended with a preposition. I don't need to say that's the movie about which I was telling you. I would sound like kind of a weirdo if I did that. I might have fewer friends and a less rewarding social life. So I actually, a healthy percentage of my time at the grammar table is dedicated to disabusing people of superstitions they have about language that hobble them when they try to write and speak naturally. I am primarily a writer and editor. That's how I think of myself. I studied literature in college and in graduate school, and there are so many ways that you can put words together in an interesting and compelling way. So I am not a very rules based kind of person. I'm aware of, and I talk about at the table, the kinds of things that you need to know to put sentences together elegantly, if you were going to try to publish something, what punctuation you might use to make it clearer, that kind of thing. But the idea that a lot of people come to me with about this very strict list of rules doesn't much affect me. I don't really think about, like,
Mhm.
I don't have a thing like you can't begin sentences with these words or end with these words. So a lot of them are just mistaken notions about what language is, can be, should be, and so on. And I think actually there's something I want to point out here, which is that for me, my role as a grammar table doesn't really require me to define grammar. So people can come up to me and talk to me about whatever they
Mhm.
want. Their idea of grammar is what they bring to me. So they might want to know about a comma, which, some people would say, well, that's really not grammar. That's not about the rules of how you put a language together, but it is something that interests people. So I'm there, or they might ask me about pronunciation. So I always bring a dictionary these days because you want to, have coverage for that kind of thing, for etymology, the history of words. So I'm there. I'm down for whatever they want to talk about.
I'm just imagining, because you're saying people come up to you and ask you these questions. What do you think makes people go up to a stranger at a grammar table in a park or on the street, or even, I'm guessing, on public transport too, and ask questions about grammar?
Well, contrary to popular belief, people are interested in grammar. For example, just on Twitter yesterday or the day before, I saw a professor who teaches writing. He said that he had asked his students what they wanted to talk about in their writing class. And he said there was a lot of interest in talking about grammar, and that surprised him. But it doesn't surprise me because people are attracted to the details of how things work. I mean, this is true for all aspects of our lives. People get interested in details, and it's kind of soothing to have a sense of just regularity. So there's an appetite for that. Like, when do I put a comma before an and, or when do I not? And then a rule, and then you don't have to worry about it. You can focus on the content, like poetic forms. You have certain ideas about how many syllables in a line, and people construct within that framework. It's not always free form. There's an attraction to form. Form is liberating. Having details is liberating. And then you're not puzzling over what past participle you actually need there. You can just think about what it is that you want to say. So people are really curious about all kinds of things language related. I mean, some people aren't. Not everyone stops. Some people
Mhm.
look at me like I'm a total weirdo and keep walking. But then also, I think people come up because I think there's an this is not really so much grammatical, but there's an appetite for human. No, it is in a way. There's an appetite for human contact. A lot of us are on computers. We're separated. And the language that ties us together is also the thing that ties people to me at the grammar table. So we're talking about language as we're using it. And that is fun and exciting. And then there's another thing too, which is that the grammar table, it allows for catharsis because you can go through quite a dramatic argument about a particular verb form. But then at the end of it, we're all friends. It's not like a high
Mhm.
stakes discussion. Like a husband and wife might come up to me and They want to talk about what pronoun form should have been in the husband's text, and that they're not going to get divorced over that. They're going to laugh. We're all going to laugh, and then they'll go away, and it's fun.
It's interesting because, when it comes to grammar and people asking you questions, grammar was always something that I perceived people were scared of because of the word grammar. And of course, during this conversation, you've mentioned terms like pronouns, subject, verb, object, order, word order. Do people really use these kinds of forms when they approach you, or do they put them in a different way? And how would that look?
Well, I do. People don't always know the names of things, but I'm used to understanding what they might be referring to. So, for example, people will come up and ask about pronouns at the end of the sentence. They mean prepositions. They'll ask about apostrophes and they'll say comma. I mean, not that often, but sometimes people space out and they say commas. And then
Mhm,
they'll call colons, semicolons, and semicolons, colons, and and hyphens, dashes, and dashes, hyphens. And a lot of times people come up feeling insecure or or they're apologetic for not knowing the names of things. And that actually, I don't think is particularly important. The things that we learn in school to have a conversation, or some of us learn in school. I don't know how it's not universal that you learn all these terms. The terms we use in school enable us to discuss them in a school context, like, okay,
mhm,
where's the subject? Where's the verb? What's the predicate? All that kind of stuff. You don't necessarily need that for adult life. You can have a really long and happy adult life without remembering what all those things are. But I think, this is how I think of it. The residue of examination, of self-aware examination in school sticks with you. You have a hangover. You have a grammar hangover. So you may not know the
mhm.
words, but often you remember things that you don't even really realize you remember.
Let's take a quick break to let you know about the sponsor of this episode. Today's episode is brought to you by the Michel Thomas Method, an accelerated stress-free approach to mastering a new language based on the way the brain prefers to receive, retain, and retrieve information. You learn through listening and speaking so that you feel a constant sense of progression, and you'll stick to it because you'll love it. Listeners of the Language Podcast get a special 30% discount on the Michel Thomas course of their choice. Just follow the link in the show notes. Coming up, Ellen tells us about the one grammar question she gets asked the most. But first, I want to know what question you'd ask Ellen if you ran into her. Are there any grammar questions you're dying to know the answer to? Let me know in the comments below, and we'll even put the most popular question to Ellen. Right, back to the chat. Here's Ellen with the grammar issue she gets asked about the most.
There's one question that I get asked about so many more times than any other question ever, and it's the Oxford comma, also known as the serial comma or the series comma, which is the comma that goes before the and in a list. Like, I ordered spaghetti, salad, and marshmallow pie. Okay, so
Mhm,
there's do you put the comma before the and or not? And people are obsessed with that. I've been asked about that probably in almost every US state. And I recently started going out with the table more again. And I swear it's like 50% of the questions are about the Oxford comma. I also get asked I don't really have a second most common question. I don't, because that's so much the winner, but I do get also asked about the singular they. I get asked about things
uh-huh,
like lie and lay, which make people absolutely insane. I get asked about which versus that. And I get asked
mhm,
about which versus that more because of, the UK. I blame the UK for that because there are inconsistencies in how they use it with how it's most often used in the United States. So if you could please fix that. And also little things like, this is also partly your fault. So things like things like where the punctuation goes around, when you have quotation marks, that kind of stuff.
mhm.
And one huge hit at the grammar table is, how do you form the possessive of something like Charles?
Yeah, do you put it after the S or before the S or add an extra S or
Well,
what do you do?
the question is, do you do Charles apostrophe book, or do you do
Mhm,
Charles apostrophe S book? So
Hmm.
often it's these little, so this is an example of how the tiny details fascinate people and they like to have them under control, because I get a disproportionate number of questions about very little things like this that don't really have a big effect on, the set. They don't have a big effect on the sentence, the meaning, what you're trying to say, but they're almost little formatting things that people want to know about. But I love that stuff. I'm happy to talk about that all day long. That's sort of the domain of an editor, which is definitely something I've spent some time in my life working as, and I've been an editor.
So I have to ask, after you mentioned the Oxford comma, are you an Oxford comma fan?
I like to maintain neutrality about a lot of things. I do currently use the Oxford comma, and I would prefer to call it the serial comma, but people don't really know it by that name so much here. They know it as the Oxford comma, so I just go with the flow there. I use it, but when I worked as a freelance reporter, I didn't use it because Associated Press style, which governs a lot of what you see in newspapers, doesn't currently use it. That could change
Mhm.
though. They consider that. I think they are considering that now, or they have been considering that recently. So you could end up with some more S's out there in more
Mhm.
publications, and I think that would be very exciting.
Tell me, what's the most surprising thing that you've been asked?
Well, probably the woman in Detroit who wanted to know how to get a red stain out of a white carpet. That one wasn't really expected. But
Could you at least
I
help?
tried hard to answer. I think I may have helped. I tried. Oh, so I was talking to a guy in New Orleans who wanted to talk about pronouns and pronoun case, which means the form of a pronoun that you use in a particular grammatical situation. For example, it's, he threw the ball, but the ball struck him, that kind of thing. And I know you know
Mhm.
about that, Richard, since you know 5 billion languages, which have a lot more
It's 5 billion
cases,
and one now.
languages languages that have many more grammatical cases than English does. But I was explaining to him, so he wanted to know how to use who and whom. And so I was explaining to him by using examples with he and him, and talking briefly about subject pronouns like he, she, we, and who, and object pronouns him, her, us, and whom. And he stopped me and he said, so that thing that you're talking about, object pronouns, could we maybe, see about changing that terminology? And I was like, why? And he said, because, it's kind of, he was concerned about the dehumanizing nature of that, so that we shouldn't be referring to him as an object pronoun. We should be more, I guess, humane about how we refer to these things. And I said,
Okay.
oh, well, it doesn't really mean that the person is an object. And he said, but you're in the grammar business. Can't you do something about it? So I said I would file a complaint.
And have you heard back about the complaint? Ticket number, what was that?
I have quite a few
Oh.
fantasy complaints filed, and there's a lot of inaction.
I think there needs to
I
be a
one thing
book
I
just
want
on your complaint files.
One thing I just want to make clear about the grammar table. One of the reasons I think people come up is because I don't look like I'm going to be scary. I'm not sitting there holding a giant
Mhm.
ruler or something like that. So it's not the grammar judgment table. It's It's more like, if I could give it a pseudonym, it'd be more like language joy or language appreciation table. I talk about slang. I talk about different dialects.
Mhm.
I do talk about standard English that you would need to use for publication or at work more than anything else, because that's what people ask me about. But I'm not there to beat people into submission to
Mhm.
particular grammar rules that I think they should follow. It's never like that.
When you're going around everywhere, what's something that always surprises people when you speak on this topic?
I can't say always, but often people are surprised that there is the amount of interest in talking about grammar that there is. And it never surprises me because I've been teaching my entire adult life with the exception of a few years, and I know people are fascinated by it. And, no matter where I am, like if I could be sitting on the edge of a farm, I could be in a park, I could be in a tiny town in the middle of Nebraska, and people will always come up and talk to me. I've never been someplace where, if I just sat there, people wouldn't come up and talk to me. On the edge of a river, like I've been in some weird places, and
It sounds like
they always want to talk about it. I do think, the surprise of it is important. I think, it seems that people don't really expect to see a grammar table on the street.
mm,
And so I consider that to be part of the playfulness of language, though, like a grammar table. Why is there a grammar table? Well, language will surprise you all the time, things that come out people's mouth, tables that pop up on the street. And one of my favorite things, and this happened just the last time I went out, people will just walk up and not even say hi, and they'll just start asking a question like, where do you put the apostrophe in this? Or, and as though it's totally normal, and I'll answer, and they'll walk away. I mean, it's
what?
bizarre. It's completely bizarre, but it just absolutely like it's my favorite thing.
That's hilarious. I love it. Like it's a normal thing on the street. Oh yeah, I'll just go on my way to work. Oh, there's the grammar table. I'll just ask a quick question.
Right.
Like
But
your
maybe not
Google.
even that
Like your
much. It's like,
Google.
no, hello, no, hello. I'm like, exactly, exactly. Sometimes, or they might not even really stop. They'll just stop long enough to ask the question. I'll say yes or no, and they're gone. But
Even
I like
Siri
it.
gets a hey.
I'm more advanced than Siri. You don't have to butter me up with a hey.
It's hilarious. I love it. Oh dear. Is there a piece of information that you particularly enjoy sharing on the topic?
I love talking about plurals and possessives of proper nouns. For example, you're doing your holiday cards, and you send them to all your friends and family, and you want to, let's say your last name is something like Cress, Cress. So then you want to say something like the Cresses went to Iceland for
Mhm,
summer vacation, and then they show pictures in their holiday letter of the big cresses and the little cresses in Reykjavik. And so the cresses, like, how do you write the plural of cress? And a lot of people do CRESS apostrophe S, but actually it's CRESSES for the plural. And then if you want to start talking about the possessives of the singular and the plural form of that noun, people get, first of all, they get confused, but they also get mad because in English, people feel like you're changing their name. Like you're not allowed to put an
mhm,
ES on the name on the end of crest. So they get all it bothers them, and that's why they start wriggling around and trying to put apostrophes in there and doing weird things. But as you know, Richard, from studying other languages, like in Slavic languages, you change the forms of names all the time. It's not a big deal. That's something I
mhm,
find really interesting in English, that people really have a hard time with that. So
mhm,
my goal is to help them feel more comfortable with adding s's to their name, adding es's to their name, should they be the, I won't say unfortunate, but the more put upon owners of a surname that concludes with an S. But I just love that stuff. And this was really weird. I was sitting on Venice Beach, and a guy
mhm,
had just asked how you form, I don't remember if it was the plural of Jones, the name Jones,
mhm.
or the possessive of Jones. But literally, I was about to open my mouth and answer. And this woman and her husband, and they had a baby and a toddler with them. The woman stopped and said, "Oh my gosh, our name is Jones." And so we literally had a Jones family there on the spot to discuss the question that this guy, whose name was not Jones, had just asked at random on the beach. And I, like, how could that even happen? I know Jones is a common name, but would you expect a whole family of Joneses to show up while you're answering a question about how to make the Jones plural? It's bizarre. It was like a perfect visual aid. And she had on this red dress. It was very striking. It was awesome.
Do you have the expression in the US, keeping up with the Joneses?
Yes. And that, see, now, like, that's an example. If you administered a dictation quiz to 100 people walking down the street and said, "Please write on this piece of paper, keeping up with the Joneses." Did you have to do dictation quizzes in school, Richard?
We did everything. You can.
Okay.
it was
So
it was the
I loved
UK.
dictation quizzes. Like I really love those. But if you administered a quiz, keeping up with the Joneses, write down a piece of paper to 100 random passersby, I think a lot of them would write Jones apostrophe S. I'm not sure how many, and it would vary depending on where you are, probably. But it would be an interesting quiz. I think actually I might try this at the grammar table now, and I will report back to you later.
So you've been going all around the US and setting up the grammar table, speaking to lots of different people and answering lots of questions about grammar. But have you been writing any of this down?
Yes.
Is there anywhere people can read this as well?
Yes, there is, in fact. And Brant, my husband, has traveled all over the US with me, and attached to the grammar table in most places I have been has been a camera. So there's been a camera behind the grammar table, a camera attached to the grammar table. He's been filming everywhere. So we have a documentary record that he's making into a film about the adventures of the grammar table. I've also completed a book that will be coming out in April called Rebel with a Clause: Tales and Tips from a Roving Grammarian.
From everything we've spoken about to do with grammar, is there one key thing that everyone should know about what we've talked about today?
I feel that a lot of your listeners probably already feel this way, but the idea that grammar is actually fun if you approach it in a way that engages the human spirit, that it is fun, it's exciting, it's sexy, like it's just interesting. And I wish that instead of having this stodgy reputation, it gets vilified a lot. People think of grammarians, grammar lovers as being pedants and pugilistic pedants. I wish they would. I wish we could have a different association with that aspect of language.
Okay. Thank you so much, Helen, for joining us today and for talking about grammar. All the very best for your future travels and getting to Connecticut.
Thank you so much. Hey, Richard, maybe one day you could sit there with me and you could be like the consultant for the other side of the Atlantic, because sometimes I could use
Absolutely.
some backup on that. Okay,
Well, I'm
thank you.
definitely up for Hawaii.
I was
I
thinking
now
of going
feel
to
like
Alaska in the winter. Alaska in the winter, we could set up near an ice fishing hole or something.
Well, I now feel that you've deliberately left Hawaii and Alaska, two of the places I want to go and visit, deliberately to
Okay.
invite me. So, of course, I'll be there.
Okay. Or you could come to Connecticut.
Yeah, Connecticut's great too. A massive thank you to Ellen Jovin for today's episode. And if you agree with her that grammar is fun, get involved in the comments section. I want to know what question you'd ask Ellen if you had the chance. And we'll put the most popular question to her. Who knows, maybe you'll make it into her next book. If you enjoyed listening to Ellen, be sure to check out her book, Rebel with a Clause: Tales and Tips from a Roving Grammarian, and read all about her adventures touring the US with the grammar table. Check the show notes for special discounts and offers. You've been listening to the Language Podcast with me, Richard Simcott. Coming up next time, we'll be speaking to David Crystal about the future of English, looking at its status around the world today and how it's set to evolve in the years to come. Don't forget to like us and subscribe.